If you do not mind, then appreciate my efforts by subscribing to my channel. Thank you very much in advance.
Welcome to Special News Channel. Ukrainian heroic soldiers are scanning the entire battle line where Russian soldiers can be found. One by one, Ukrainian fighters are burrowing Russian soldiers in the holes they entered. The Ukrainian army was able to capture a large number of Russian soldiers without even pulling the trigger, with the operations carried out from the ground and from the air. In the 9th month of the war, the Ukrainian army succeeded in retaking most of the Russian-occupied territories with counterattacks against the Russian army. It does not go unnoticed that the Russian army is quite weak and demoralized after the losses in Ukraine. Russia has been working on several different strategies lately to recover the losses in Ukraine. The most important of the Russian army's strategies in the war in Ukraine is the allegations about additional mobilization. In September, Russian President Putin announced a mobilization of 300,000 troops, which included Russian men joining the Russian fronts in the war in Ukraine. Russian reservists who took part in the conflicts in Ukraine were subjected to criticism after their unsuccessful results. The crushing of the mobilized Russian soldiers in the presence of the Ukrainian army shook Putin's throne and caused him to lose reputation. However, Russian leader Putin may not have learned from the events in Ukraine due to the mobilization in the past months, so he's taking risks again. Everyone is curious about the consequences of Putin's new mobilization decision in Ukraine, because a possible failure of Putin in Ukraine may remove the Russian leader from his seat. The Kremlin elite carefully follows all the news from Ukraine. Even if they seem to support the Russian leader's decision to mobilize as a majority, the possible failure in Ukraine could play into the hands of the anti-Putin opponents. While mobilization in Russia is on the agenda again, the Ukrainian army is capturing Russian soldiers in Ukraine. Ukrainian fighters continue to corner the areas occupied by Russian soldiers. During the attack by the Ukrainian army, the video of the Russian soldiers surrendering to the drone fell into the agenda like a bomb. The Ukrainian military trolled Russia with a social media video showing a Russian soldier surrendering to a drone. The Ministry of Defense of Ukraine made an interesting post the other day. The Ukrainian Air Force continues to focus heavily on using tactical and surveillance drones to assist in the nearly 9-month war with invading Russian forces. The video, shared by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, was taken from the drone's vantage point and allegedly showed a Russian soldier walking on a grassy field with his hands up after surrendering. Ukrainian UAVs are the fiercest enemies of the Russian invaders, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense said while sharing the video. The Ukrainian army continues to give privileges to the surrendering Russian soldiers. The Ukrainian army also took its attacks on Russian soldiers, capturing an invader who realized that surrender had a chance of survival, instead of trying to resist the UAF, where the chances of survival were zero. After the video in which he shared his Ukrainian powers, it came with him in the comments. In the comments made, it was argued that the soldier caught by Ukrainian fighters may have surrendered to the ground troops instead of the unmanned aerial vehicle. Towards the end of the 22-second clip shared by Ukrainian officials on social media, it is understood that the Russian soldier was walking towards a group of soldiers, presumably Ukrainian, who were pointing guns at him. It is not yet clear what kind of drone the footage shared by the Ukrainian authorities was recorded by. Some UAVs of the Ukrainian army, such as the US-made Switchblade drones, are violent assault weapons capable of easily killing soldiers or destroying military equipment. Other drones used by Ukraine pose little direct threat. Surveillance drone supply has been on the rise since the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced the creation of the global donation initiative, United 24's Drone Army Program. The Army of Drones program is asking international donors to provide monetary donations to purchase consumer drones and other drones for Ukraine. Hamel was appointed ambassador for the Army of Drone program in September. The Ukrainians need drones to protect their lands, their freedom, and the values of the entire democratic world, Hamel said. In addition to the ambassador of the Drone Army program remarks, now is the best time for everyone to come together and help Ukraine stand up in this war against the evil empire, he added. US officials estimate that Russia suffered more than 100,000 casualties during the war in Ukraine. US officials expressed the implied comments of the Russian army's desperation with the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine as follows. After successful Ukrainian counterattacks, a growing number of Russian soldiers are surrendering without any opposition drones or encouragement from soldiers, US officials said. Ukraine signed a campaign that supports the statement of the US authorities. Ukrainian authorities launched the I Want to Live campaign to encourage Russian troops to lay down their arms in September and operated the hotline and chatbot to help soldiers pre-arrange their surrender. Campaign spokesman Vitaly Matvienko said that, since September 18th, more than 3,500 requests to surrender have been received from Russian soldiers. While the loss of power in the Russian army and resignations and surrenders accelerated, Russian leader Putin launched a retaliatory attack on Ukrainian cities due to the collapse of the Russian army after the attacks of the Ukrainian army. The Russian leader ordered his officers to launch missile attacks across the country, especially in the capital Kyiv. The Russian army recently launched its missiles aimlessly over Ukrainian cities. Missiles of the Russian army threatened the lives of civilians living in Ukrainian cities. Russian missiles fired the other day condemned Ukraine to darkness. The Russian army repeated its unlawful attacks. Russian missiles targeted power plants and infrastructure systems in Ukraine.